Have you ever looked back at a relationship that once felt so close and realized you haven't been yourself since the day you stepped into it? You used to laugh more. You used to trust more. You used to sleep well, breathe easily, and forgive without fear. But somewhere along the line, you began to second-guess your own emotions. You started holding back when all you wanted was to speak the truth. You found yourself doubting memories that once felt certain. There was no violence, no dramatic breakdown, but you know something has been manipulated, because true evil isn't always loud. It shows up in the perfectly timed concern, in the eyes that pretend to understand you more than anyone else, in the silent withdrawals that make you wonder if you were the one who caused the pain. This video isn't meant to plant suspicion. It's here to pull you out of that gray zone where truth gets blurred by sweet gestures. You'll learn to recognize every tactic of the manipulator, from subtle role reversals to silent revenge, and understand why standing calmly, firmly in your truth is the most powerful resistance. And if there's ever been a moment when you thought you were weak, I ask you to stay with this journey, because by the end of it, you may realize you were never weak. You were simply being controlled. If any of this speaks to you, stay. The story begins now. When evil isn't afraid of being exposed, but afraid you no longer tremble. There's a paradox in human psychology that few dare to face. Truly evil people don't panic when they're exposed. They only panic when you stop trembling like before, when you stop reacting, when you're no longer confused, when you stop trying to justify them, excuse them, or protect the idealized image you once clung to. For the wicked, truth has never been the threat. What they truly fear is a person who once broke under them suddenly standing calm, because evil doesn't live on violence. It feeds on your emotions. It breathes through the tears you can't hold back, the sleepless nights filled with nameless rage. It grows inside the self-doubt you've been chewing on for months. And when you begin to see everything clearly, not with hatred, but with stillness, that's when it truly begins to panic. They don't need you to scream. They don't need you to fight. They don't need you to shout to the world who they are. All they need is one thing: your weakness, your self-doubt, your sensitivity that makes you easy to sway, and your willingness to forgive because you don't want to become the bad one. As long as you're trembling, they still have control. So why is it that when you become calm and clear, they don't apologize but start destroying your credibility instead? Why do apologies turn into rumors whispered in the dark, strange looks from old friends, and painful accusations you only hear through someone else? Simple because in their world, no one is allowed to see the truth, not even you. The core of an evil person's behavior isn't pain, it's control. They manipulate to maintain status. They perform morality to avoid being unmasked. And when their image feels threatened, they scramble to reclaim dominance, not by fixing anything, but by making you look like the problem. You start to feel distanced from your circle. You notice your words fall flat. You watch them slide into the role of the wounded, earning sympathy and trust, while you quietly become too intense, too sensitive, or too much. But deep inside, you still know what's real. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And Epictetus added, "He who has injured you was either stronger or weaker than you. If weaker, spare him. If stronger, spare yourself." And it is in that moment when you choose stillness, without submission and without retaliation, that evil starts to reveal itself. It can no longer control you through tears. It can't keep you awake at night with cryptic words. It can't make you carry the weight of a false image just to keep the peace. It loses power because you are no longer the puppet of emotion. You're the one holding the strings. And then the game begins. No more sweet words. No more accidental wounds. Only deliberate steps, quiet, calculated, and clear. When you see the truth, you don't just threaten the image they've built. You threaten the very world they live in. So hold your stillness. Watch each of the next signs, like steps descending deeper, not to be afraid, but to understand. Because only when you understand can you walk away. Not from weakness, but from the freedom you've chosen. And if you're ready, we begin the 7 stages of evil once it knows that you know. 1. They deny, play the victim, and act innocent. When the truth hurts them, they don't admit it. They make you feel cruel for bringing it up. There's a moment you'll never forget. Not because it was loud or intense, but because it was so quiet you could hear the sound of something cracking deep inside. It's the moment you stand in front of someone who once meant a lot to you. You bring the truth not to win, but simply to seek clarity. You don't shout, you don't accuse, you just see it clearly now. That something went wrong, that you were hurt, that you need them to face it like an adult. But what you get in return isn't an apology. It's tears, a trembling face, a choked voice. I only did that because I felt so small next to you. You're always right, always strong. I didn't know how else to be heard. You go silent, no longer sure who's really hurt whom. For those who know how to manipulate, being exposed isn't a failure. It's the start of a new performance, the role of the victim. They don't try to make things right. They try to make you feel guilty just for recognizing the truth. This is a well-known psychological tactic called guilt shifting. When confronted, they don't deny the event. They deny the intention. They say they acted that way because they were hurt, because they were lonely, because you were too cold. And in an instant, the story stops being about what they did and becomes about how bad you made them feel. They take over the conversation emotionally, an emotional hijack. They drag you into a maze of pity where you're the one who's heartless, unempathetic, and they're just a scared child pushed into a corner. Every logical point you bring up starts to dissolve because your heart begins to soften in the face of tears no one can verify. I've been in that situation. I found out my ex had lied to me many times, for many months, while hiding behind the mask of everything's fine. When I confronted her with complete calm, no anger, no insult, the first thing she did was cry. She said, "I did it because I never felt good enough for you. You're always strong. I was afraid you'd leave me. I just wanted a bit of attention." I stood there, holding undeniable proof in my hands. And yet, I felt like I was the one causing emotional harm. She never said, "I'm sorry I lied." She said, "I'm sorry I was weak." And in that moment, I almost held her. I almost forgot that the one who had been truly hurt in this relationship wasn't her. Stoicism teaches us something deeply important in moments like this. Facts do not disturb us, our perception does. Epictetus. It's not the truth that breaks you. It's how you interpret it that takes you down. When someone rewrites the story to make you feel guilty for seeing clearly, you need to ask, does this guilt come from true compassion, or is it a quiet strike at your self-respect? Don't argue. Don't try to make your point. Because someone playing the victim isn't listening. They're performing for the crowd behind you. Step back, observe, listen for the repetition. If someone is always the victim in every relationship, if they always have an excuse for their actions, if they always know how to make others feel guilty, then the issue isn't the situation, it's who they've chosen to become. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone who's always the victim even when they're the one causing the pain? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes speaking the truth is the first step to getting your voice back. No one is born a manipulator, but some choose manipulation because they don't know any other way to ask for empathy than through tears. And you're not responsible for carrying their wounded past in the silence of your own. The only way to walk out of this performance is not by arguing, not by blind forgiveness, but by a stoic act of courage, separating emotion from truth. You can feel compassion without agreement. You can feel heartache and still choose to leave. You can keep your kindness and still turn away from someone who no longer deserves it. And that's when the manipulation ends. Not because they gave up, but because you stopped playing. 2. They smear you and rebuild a new image for themselves. There's a sinister shift that happens the moment a malicious person realizes you've seen who they truly are. From defensive, they go on the offensive. No longer afraid of the truth, they become the director of a new play where they are the victim and you are the villain. They don't wait for you to speak. They move first. They distort the truth. They control how others perceive you through whispers, side conversations, and emotionally charged but twisted retellings. The goal isn't to defeat you, it's to make sure no one hears you anymore. This is a classic tactic among manipulators. Narrative control, because they know that in a society run on empathy, whoever tells the story first wins the advantage. They won't call you evil. They'll just sadly explain that you've changed, that you've grown distant, cold, perhaps even toxic. They'll plant doubts, not conclusions, because they know a well-placed question is often more dangerous than a direct accusation. And while you're still trying to collect the pieces of yourself after the shock, they've already built a new circle, one where you're excluded, looked at strangely, and labeled as a problem rather than a person. Stoicism doesn't teach us to argue against every lie. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time defending your name, just live in a way that disproves them." And perhaps no one understood this better than Tonya Crafter, former kindergarten teacher in Georgia, USA, who was falsely accused of child abuse in an organized smear campaign led by former friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Tonya was arrested in 2008 after 3 girls, including her own daughter, made allegations against her. But later, it was discovered that the children's testimonies had been coached and manipulated by biased adults driven by envy, prejudice, and a desire to control the narrative. Over the next 2.5 years, Tonya lost everything: her career, her reputation, her children, and the trust of her entire community. Instead of lashing out, she chose to build a strong legal team, document every piece of evidence, and maintain an extraordinary sense of calm. In 2010, she was found not guilty, completely innocent, but the psychological damage was beyond measure. She later said, "If I had reacted the way they wanted, with rage, breakdown, or desperation, they would have won. But I chose to stand still in the truth." After being exonerated, Tonya didn't stop at reclaiming her freedom. She moved forward on a path of fierce resilience. She studied law. She became an attorney, earned her doctorate, and dedicated the rest of her life to defending those who had been falsely accused, smeared, and silenced like she once was. She didn't live to retaliate, lived to become living proof that the truth cannot be buried. Tonya didn't live to refute every lie. She lived to prove that she was not the person they had made her out to be. And in the end, the truth spoke. That is also the path you must take. Not the easiest road, but the strongest one. When you're smeared, your first instinct is to explain, call people, post online, try to clarify every detail. But the more you chase it, the more you lose the one thing that separates you from them: your dignity. Let their actions expose themselves, because those who build their image by stealing yours will eventually contradict themselves. Stay silent, but never submissive. Continue living with integrity, discipline, and quiet strength. And if someone asks whether you're going to respond, just say this: I don't live to chase rumors. I live to become living proof of a truth that doesn't need to shout, but will never fade. You can't stop others from fabricating stories, but you can live in a way that lets the truth speak. If this resonates with you, share it, so others know they're not alone in the fight to protect themselves. 3. They isolate you and cut off your support network. When a manipulator realizes you've seen through their mask, they don't panic, they calculate. They understand one thing clearly: a person who still has friends, still has family, still has a solid web of connections is a person who still has strength. And so, their next move isn't to apologize, nor to admit fault, but to divide, to isolate, to sever you from anything that might lift you out of their control. Manipulators do this quietly, over months, sometimes even years. They plant seeds through seemingly harmless phrases. Is everything okay with them lately? I hate to say it, but I'm a little concerned about how they've been acting. I just want what's best for everyone. I hope no one else gets hurt. Subtle, repeated whispers until the entire circle around you begins to question. This is one of the most ruthless tools in psychological manipulation: isolation, combined with communal gaslighting. The goal isn't just to strip you of support, it's to make you lose trust in yourself. When you have no one left to ask, "Am I wrong?" you'll start believing that maybe you are. Stoicism calls this the stage that demands the highest form of dignity: inner independence, not situational independence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Freedom doesn't come from being surrounded by the right people. It comes from keeping your inner voice alive wherever you are." When you're isolated, you don't need to shout louder, you need to stand firmer. I once knew a man named David Lynn, a design lead at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle. David was calm, responsible, and respected by many of his co-workers. But his relationship with his direct manager, a man often praised for his strong leadership style, began to sour. This manager routinely took credit for ideas from his team and presented them to the board as his own. And when mistakes happened, he skillfully shifted blame onto those without a voice. Everything became clear when David, in an internal meeting, calmly offered feedback, not to attack anyone, but to point out some process issues and suggest ways to improve the project flow. Just days later, David was removed from key email threads. His name disappeared from important meetings. Colleagues who used to confide in him began to grow distant. Then, one of his former interns sent him a recording in which the manager said, "David's been showing some troubling signs lately. I don't want to make a big deal of it, but let's keep the team stable, don't let him drag morale down." David didn't fight back. He left the company 3 months later. No complaints, no drama, just lived with integrity, calm, professional, and principled. 2 years later, he became creative director at a larger firm where several former colleagues, who had also left, came to work with him again. They never believed the rumors. They believed in the man. That story reminds me of Brendan Fraser, the Hollywood icon, once beloved for his role in the Mummy franchise. After accusing a high-ranking figure in the entertainment industry of harassment, Fraser was quietly frozen out. Film offers vanished. Relationships in the industry grew cold. He fell into depression, lost roles, lost his marriage, and disappeared from Hollywood for over a decade. No one publicly blacklisted him. They just stopped standing next to him. And that is the most insidious kind of isolation. No one says it, but everyone walks away. Brendan Fraser once said, "I wasn't hit, but I was submerged." The whole world went silent, and I knew I had been cut off. But he didn't retaliate. He didn't harbor hate. He lived quietly, cared for his autistic son, and held on to his dignity. Nearly 20 years later, he returned with The Wayland won the Oscar. Standing on stage, he said a single line that left the room in tears. "It was forgotten, but I didn't give up." If you feel like you're being cut off, don't let the silence finish what they started. Send a message. Reconnect with someone who once felt like home. Rebuild the bridges that were twisted by someone else's words. Because the evil may divide you, but only you can choose to stay connected. Because isolation only works when you forget. You don't need the whole world to believe in you. You just need one truth and one person willing to listen. Have you ever experienced isolation at the hands of another? If you have, share your story. Someone out there might be waiting for a signal that they are not alone. 4. They offer fake apologies and pretend to change. Not everyone who says, "I'm sorry," is truly remorseful, especially when the person saying it is the one who once hurt you, manipulated you, and used your kindness as a tool to regain control. When you've seen their true nature, the manipulator doesn't simply back off. They try a new tactic softer, more touching. They apologize. They say the things you once wished they'd admit. They look at you with seemingly regretful eyes. They sigh, talk about the past, open up about pain, and say, "I know I was wrong." But if you listen closely, you'll notice something. They're not really sorry for what they did. They're just sorry that you found out. Listen to the familiar phrasing, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt." It sounds polite, but it avoids all accountability. The hurt lies in your feelings, not their actions. This is a very common form of emotional manipulation known as the false apology. At the core of a real apology is responsibility. At the core of a fake one is redirection. Instead of saying, "I was wrong," they say, "You felt wronged." Instead of saying, "I will change," they say, "You should give me another chance." Stoic philosophy doesn't reject forgiveness, but it doesn't encourage repetition. Epictetus once said, "No one harms you unless you give them the power to do it again." Forgiveness without change is just a loop, and the longer that loop, the more of yourself you lose. I once witnessed this in an old friend. She had always come across as warm, a good listener, gentle until you truly needed her to show up. That's when you realized all her kindness was transactional. When you needed her honesty, she disappeared. And when you went silent, she returned, full of tearful apologies. "I've really changed. I realize I was wrong." She spoke about her healing journey, about self-help workshops, about finding her inner light, and you, in a moment of softness, let her back into your life. But just a few weeks later, it all returned. Broken promises, ignored commitments, relationships used like before. You realized she hadn't changed. She'd just gotten better at saying sorry. And Ethan, a financial advisor in Chicago, lived through something similar. He and his business partner, Kyle, had spent 5 years building a loyal client base together. But Ethan discovered Kyle was secretly pulling clients into his own firm. Without drama, Ethan quietly stepped away. 3 months later, Kyle returned, handwriting a letter. "I lost myself under pressure. I was truly wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to say I'm sorry." Ethan agreed to meet, not to work together again, but to bring closure. Appeared remorseful, sincere. But just a week later, Ethan heard from an old client that Kyle was telling others he was the one who turned Ethan away. He wasn't sorry, he wanted information. And he used that meeting to twist the narrative again. Ethan didn't retaliate, didn't explain himself. He simply clarified the truth with those who mattered and kept living and working with quiet integrity. So how do you recognize a real apology? There are 3 signs. They don't just say sorry, they don't defend themselves. They don't just make promises, they change their behavior. They don't pressure you to forgive, they respect the distance you need. Real change is quiet, it's consistent, it accepts rejection and still chooses to do better. Manipulative change is urgent, dramatic, and always designed to trigger your sympathy. A truly sorry person doesn't say, "I'm sorry now, you have to forgive me." They say, "I understand if you can't, but I'll live differently anyway." If you've been through this, take a step back. Don't be lulled by the words. Listen to the actions. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When someone claims they've changed, don't rush to believe. Watch how they live when there's no one left to impress." You may feel torn between compassion and pain, but you only need to ask one question. Are you forgiving her being lulled back into sleep? Have you ever given someone another chance because they said they had changed? What made you believe them, and what made you realize it was all just another act? Share your story, because someone out there, still unsure, may finally wake up through your truth. 5. They manipulate your emotions with new lies. And when fake apologies no longer work, they don't walk away. They move on to a more sophisticated tactic. New lies, not to calm you down, but to control your emotions on a deeper level. They don't shout. They don't justify themselves like before. They become gentle. Sometimes it's a worried message. "I still think about you a lot." Sometimes it's an unexpected question. "Are you okay? You look a little tired lately." And right after that comes a criticism wrapped in concern. "It's just sad that you weren't mature enough to protect what we once had." This is a well-known technique in emotional manipulation, weaving softness and blame, blending affection with a subtle knife. They say something that melts your heart, then instantly make you feel guilty. They paint a picture of your past relationship, half beautiful, half distorted, blurring the line between truth and a memory they've rewritten. And if you're not careful, you start to question yourself. Was I too sensitive? Was I asking for too much? Or was I really the one at fault, like they say? Psychology calls this trauma bonding, a toxic attachment formed through repeated cycles of pain and relief. When your brain gets stretched between affection and harm, between hope and heartbreak, you don't walk away, you cling harder, hoping one day they'll return to being the person who once made you happy. But that's not love. That's emotional addiction, and they're the drug. Stoic philosophy warned us about this early on. The one who governs their emotions cannot be governed. And you must remember, if someone constantly makes you doubt your own worth, they don't love you. They're rewriting your identity, using your own emotions as ink. I once knew a woman named Eliza. After a tearful breakup with a controlling boyfriend, she tried to walk away, but just 2 weeks later, he came back, apologizing, sharing a dream he had where he saw her crying alone. He said, "I could feel your sadness, even from a distance." Eliza softened. She replied. He messaged again, "If you really want to leave, I won't stop you, but don't blame me if I can't stay friends." She stayed silent. He sent a voice recording of himself crying, along with a message, "You're too cold. No one can handle being let go like this." From pity, Eliza began to feel guilty. From guilt, she felt the need to explain. And from explaining, she slipped back into the cycle, trying to clarify, trying to be fair, trying to keep the peace. But all it did was return her to the same place, being controlled by her own desire to be understood. That's what the best manipulators know how to do. They use understanding as a warped mirror, so when you look in, you no longer see yourself. You see a version they created. Weak, selfish, ungrateful, and you believe it. Have you ever been trapped in that cycle, thinking it was love when it was really emotional control? If so, leave just one word: enough. Because only when you set the limit can they no longer write the next chapter. If you're still in that cycle, don't try to beat them. Rewrite the story not with an explanation to them, but with an affirmation to yourself. Write out who you are, what you believe, what you deserve, and stop there. No need to send it. No need for anyone to approve it. Because once you know what story you're living, no one else can drag you into the emotional waves they created. You don't need others to believe in you. You just need not to lose yourself again. Once more, remember this. If they ever truly loved you, they wouldn't make you question your worth. If they were ever sincere, they wouldn't need tears, guilt, or nostalgia to pull you back. And if they had truly changed, they would respect your decision, even if you never returned. And if they can't do that, then every gentle word they say is just another chain woven from the fabric of your own emotions. 6. They seek revenge in silence, through invisible psychological blows. Some forms of revenge don't look like an attack. There are no screams, no explosive conflicts, just quiet, cold actions, deliberate, calculated to make you lose your balance, lose your support, and eventually retreat alone. When a manipulator realizes they can no longer manipulate you, they don't apologize, they don't walk away, they don't change. They quietly switch to another strategy, revenge, but not the kind you see in movies. This is soft revenge, passive retaliatione, silent punishment that leaves no trace, but gradually pushes you out. They might sever the resources you once relied on slowly, excluding you from projects, giving you poor evaluations, assigning you vague blame. They may spread misunderstandings without ever attaching their name, or offer fake support just enough for others to quietly see you as a burden. They don't need to strike directly, they only need others to look at you with suspicion. Stoicism calls this a sign of weakness, not strength. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "He who seeks revenge has not mastered himself. Those who retaliate in silence are not strong, they're wounded by losing control. And they'll do anything to make you hurt just as much, even if they never say a word." I once encountered such a case. A friend I thought was close, someone I believed was an ally. She would often speak of supporting me, seemed sincere, always telling others how much she respected my efforts. But the moment I stopped following her lead in a work decision, strange things began to happen. I was removed from project lists without notice. Important emails never reached me. A colleague said they were warned I was becoming difficult to work with. All of it happened quietly. No one confronted me. No one blamed me directly. But I could feel an invisible punishment designed to weaken me. And that is the cruelest kind of revenge, making it impossible for you to speak the truth because there's no proof. When you speak up, you're labeled oversensitive, paranoid. When you stay quiet, you're slowly suffocated. This reminded me of Jamie Dimon, current CEO of JP Morgan Chase, who was once removed from Citigroup by his own mentor Sandy Weil. Jamie had helped Weil build Citigroup into one of the world's largest banks. But when he started showing independence, no longer following orders, blindly things began to shift. There was no accusation, no public argument. But in 1998, Jamie was forced out of Citigroup in silence. No explanation, no clear reason. Every opportunity for advancement was quietly shut down. Instead of striking back, he stepped away. He joined Bank One, rebuilt from the ground up, and later led JP Morgan through the 2008 financial crisis, turning it into one of the most powerful banks in the world. Jamie didn't take revenge, he rebuilt his worth. And that is the most sustainable form of response. That's why Stoicism doesn't urge us to chase explanations from those who act this way. Instead, the Stoic path asks us to build an internal force zone that no one can sever. That force consists of three things: mentors those who truly understand you, values the principles you live by even when no one's watching, and a real network not built on status or benefit, but on mutual trust. A friend of many a mid-level manager in a creative firm was once targeted with this kind of revenge. A long-time colleague, after being denied a promotion for internal reasons, began playing innocent. On the surface, he still praised my friend, nodded in meetings. But behind the scenes, he submitted anonymous negative feedback and quietly blocked new team members from joining the group. My friend couldn't confront him directly. Everything was too subtle, so he chose another way. He quietly rebuilt trust within his team, made his progress transparent, and began cultivating relationships with senior mentors, not to beg for help, but to keep the truth alive. A year later, the one who retaliated was reassigned for violating internal ethics, and my friend was promoted not for accusing anyone, but for standing firm in integrity. That's the Stoic choice, not to strike back, but not to collapse either, not to complain, but not to let yourself be suffocated. They choose to live clearly, calmly, and let the truth surface over time. If you've ever been silently retaliated against, you're not alone. Don't try to win by hurting them the way they hurt you. Win by remaining steady in the light of who you are. 7. They lose control and reveal their true nature. Everything they've done, denial, smearing, isolation, fake apologies, emotional manipulation, and silent revenge had one goal: to keep you under control, to keep you playing the role of co-star in a script they've been directing. But when all those tactics fail, when you stop reacting, stop following, they enter their most dangerous state: losing control. The mask they once wore, gentle, kind, understandingly, slips, not because they choose to remove it, but because they can no longer hold it up. The one who once manipulated through silence becomes loud. The one who once manipulated through tenderness becomes agitated. The one who once blamed you sweetly now screams in public, using words like knives, aimed directly at you, without a filter. And then you realize everything you once suspected was true. But now you're no longer afraid. This is what Stoicism calls the golden trial, when you stand calmly in the middle of a storm, not because you underestimate it, but because you finally understand its nature. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Your calmness is the greatest punishment to those who feed on control." When you don't fight back, don't retreat, don't explain, your stillness becomes the mirror that reflects their distortion most clearly. I witnessed this once in an old friend group where one person was always the narrator, the center of every gathering, the one who connected everyone with humor and perfectly timed concern. But behind the scenes, he also held everyone's secrets, used intimacy as a weapon, and gradually spun a web of control over the group. When one of the quieter members, someone who rarely spoke up, started asking questions, started skipping meetups, started breaking the emotional schedule he'd come to expect, it all erupted. Midnight walls of text, public jabs at group dinners, online posts dripping with blame. He's two-faced. I've always supported him, and he betrayed me. People need to know who the real fake is. A storm of emotional chaos was unleashed because he knew he could no longer control the one who'd stepped out. The most terrifying thing to a manipulator isn't your defiance, it's your refusal to perform. When you walk off the stage, their starring role loses its reason to exist. And this is also the point where they may begin to self-destruct, because there's no longer a mask to protect. Some grow extreme, some lose clarity, some dive into new conflicts to feel powerful again, but none of them are a threat to you anymore, because you've walked away. So what matters most now? That you don't react, No need to prove anything, no need to call people and explain the full story. Those who have seen will see, those who've believed will understand, and those who still choose to stay with them no longer belong in your world. Stoicism never teaches you to live in order to expose others. It teaches you to live in a way that lets people's true nature reveal itself over time. And when it does, you don't need to celebrate. You just need to remain grounded, like a lighthouse, unmoved by the storm. The question is, when they scream, will you react? Or will you stand still like a lighthouse? The answer won't come from your words. It will come from how you choose to live after everything. You've just walked through 7 ways a manipulator reacts when they know that you know. Every tactic from fake apologies to subtle smearing, even silent retaliation, was never aimed at your body. They were aimed at your mind. They were designed to make you doubt yourself, walk away from what was once real, and return to the very person who broke you, because there's no one left to trust. But Stoicism wasn't born to help you defend. It exists to help you rise. It doesn't teach you to fight back with rage but with stillness. Not with accusations, but by living as someone who's seen the truth and refuses to bow. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Your calmness is the greatest punishment to those who feed on control." And Epictetus reminds us, the one who governs their emotions cannot be governed by anyone else. When you stay grounded through slander, when you choose silence out of fear, but out of understanding, when you stop performing the role they wrote for you, you are no longer the victim. You are the survivor with dignity. And if this video awakens something in you, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone is facing the same manipulative game alone, and one well-timed voice might be all they need to feel less alone. Let the truth speak, starting with you.